It was an entirely predictable defeat for Newcastle United at Liverpool last night. In this video I'm going to explain exactly what went wrong and see how Newcastle can bounce back over the next coming weeks with crucial fixtures coming up. Let's get into it. Hello, welcome back to my channel, welcome back to another video. Before we get going, as always, please continue to like, share and subscribe to the videos and the channel. Lots of big plans coming up, but I need your support, trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the season. As you're aware of by now, I really enjoy making these videos. I want to make more of them, I want to do more stuff. Give me your thoughts on last night's game, give me your thoughts on Newcastle's current situation coming into the cup final. Please like the video as well, and also please crucially subscribe, trying to get to 1,000 subs by the end of the season, and I need your help to do it. But we'll get straight into the video, and it was a really poor performance I thought for Newcastle. Predictable result, 2-0 to Liverpool. Anfield's never been a good place for Newcastle to go, and it was really as textbook as it's been over there. You know, Newcastle go there and rarely impose themselves. They wait for Liverpool to dictate the game and they wait to be beaten, and effectively that's what happened. Lots of fans questioning the effort, lots of fans questioning what Eddie Howe could have done tactically. Could he have done it differently? He changed the system, went for a 4-4-2 at times in the first half, didn't quite work. Bruno and Tonali were a little bit isolated. We'll talk about them specifically later on in the video. We'll obviously start with the elephant in the room, which is that Alexander Isak was on the bench, literally, but he wasn't available for selection because he was out with a groin injury, and that really cost Newcastle. That it wasn't predicted before, it wasn't mentioned in the pre-match press conferences. It wasn't, Isak featured heavily on the match promo from the club as well, so this was something that I think the club really wanted to keep under wraps, because obviously the leak that Isak wasn't playing coming out would have given Liverpool an even bigger advantage than it got, an hour and 15 minutes before kickoff. Some conspiracy theories out there that he isn't actually injured. Apparently it was a groin problem that he felt after Nottingham Forest and they didn't want to risk him. And with the final coming up, and obviously, that being a big thing, I think that's probably true, that they didn't want to risk him even though he probably could have got through the game. I think Eddie Howe since said that it wasn't particularly serious, the injury, or they hope it isn't. But lots of conspiracy theories saying that he's just been rested, he's not injured at all, and there's always an excuse for a poor performance. And they would go to Wembley in a few weeks' time with a much stronger situation, players back, and play a different game, and not give Liverpool a sort of way of thinking of how to deal with them. I don't really buy that. I believe Eddie Howe that he had an injury. I believe Eddie Howe that he was not quite fit for this game, but I also think he was probably rested with the cup final and those crucial games in mind. There's no point in playing a player when they're not fit, especially in a game at Liverpool where it's unlikely, even if he plays, that Newcastle are going to get a result, because Liverpool have lost once in 28 this season in the league. It didn't feel like Newcastle were ever in a position to go and get that win in terms of their confidence levels coming off the back of that nervy victory over Forest, the game at Manchester City in their last away game. It was always going to be difficult. So I think, taking Isak out of the game in this one, rather than, God forbid, the cup final or even Sunday's game if he got injured earlier, if he had to miss a game, it was probably most sensible for him to miss this one, because Newcastle were always going to be up against it. That said, the team was still good enough, I think, and there's evidence for this, to get something out of that game. Callum Wilson coming in is still a very good striker. Missed a couple of chances, clearly very rusty, which you can imagine that he will be after barely playing for a year, and that was reflective in those two missed chances that he had. Obviously, one was offside where he chipped it past Alisson's post. The other one was where he fired it past the other post from a decent angle, having got through one-on-one. Both of those, obviously one would only have counted, but both of those you would imagine that Isak being on the pitch would have scored. So maybe that does sort of contradict the point I was making about this game being, already difficult enough to win. But Newcastle did create chances in that first half. Gordon was a little bit lively. The reason why I think Newcastle lost this game was because, yes, Isak wasn't there, but Bruno and Tonali didn't play well in that midfield, and that's been the bedrock of every good performance Newcastle have had, is that that tandem working really well. The pair of them winning the ball, allowing Newcastle to break and being protective of that defence, which is quite slow. They were both at fault for both of Liverpool's goals, which was really, really unfortunate. That set the tone really for the game. If you don't have one of your top players, you need the others to step up. And I've said previously that Newcastle rely heavily on their individuals to win games and play really well. Last season it was Gordon, Bruno and Isak. Now you add Tonali into that. And 2 or 3 of those players play well. Newcastle tend to have a good chance of winning a game. One wasn't there. The others didn't really step up in the way that they needed to give Newcastle that foothold. I think the only player who comes out of this game with a lot of credit is Lewis Hall, because he kept Mohamed Salah very quiet. He was really, really good, and that's another game towards his Player of the Year contendership, I think, really. For me, yes, Tonali coming in and sort of transforming the season. Yes, Alexander Isak's goals will probably take the headlines when it comes to the Player of the Year conversation. But in terms of consistency from August to now, Lewis Hall has been absolutely superb, and he was brilliant again yesterday. Really marshalled Salah very well. And Liverpool, the difficult thing for me was that Liverpool didn't have to be that good last night. Newcastle were okay at times in the first half, and then the second goal from McAllister, they didn't have to do much in the game, and yet they could have easily won 3 or 4-0. That's how difficult Anfield is. It's never been a good place for Newcastle. They've never performed well, and that's exactly what you need from your team. When you go into a place like this, you need the likes of Bruno and the likes of Tonali to step up. The reality is that it was always going to be difficult, especially when Bruno and Tonali aren't playing particularly well. But at the same time, there was no Joe Linton and no Botman as well, and lots of people, rightly I think, are a lot more confident about the cup final off the back of this. There's evidence there that Liverpool are beatable. Newcastle were able to break the lines, and with Isak up front, there would have been chances put away, I think, in that game. Gordon was a little bit lively. If Bruno and Tonali can get Joe Linton next to them, and that physical enforcer that was so good at Anfield 2 years ago when Newcastle were very unlucky in defeat, and that was the best performance I've ever seen from a Newcastle side at Anfield. Isak's debut, he scored obviously in that game. Joe Linton was really crucial that day in breaking up the play and just the general aggression and what we came to know and love about that team at Newcastle. I think if he's in that side at Wembley, there'll be a physical presence that will stunt the likes of McAllister and Szoboszlai and whoever else is in that Liverpool midfield. Tonali and Bruno can get on the ball and have a little bit more structure. They were probably let down a little bit by the fact that there was a system change and they were exposed. They were a man down in the midfield at times. I think Howe tactically probably got it wrong overall. But Botman back as well. There's a lot of reasons why Newcastle can be positive about this cup final coming up because of the performance that they put in this game. I think they'll be in a position to go for it, and I think they'll be in a position to be confident about it. Obviously, Liverpool have a lot of quality. Liverpool will have chances. Newcastle have to be brave. With Botman, Joe Linton and Isak, that's the spine of a team that can really take Newcastle to a new level, on top of the players that will undoubtedly play better around that system. I think Howe was probably wrong in the way he approached the game, as I say, with that midfield. Maybe it's harsh to drop Louis Miley after his performance against Nottingham Forest. He would have given them a bit more of a foothold and a sort of height presence in the midfield as well, but also given Tonali and Bruno that structure and ability to play in their similar roles. I think we know with Bruno and Tonali that when they don't have that structure, previously there's been a lot of conversation about whether they can play together, and that's because the structure hasn't been quite right. It's really worked in the recent weeks and months because Tonali's been at the base and Bruno's been a bit higher. There was a lot of chasing shadows yesterday from the pair of them because the system changed. I think Eddie Howe does have to take some responsibility for that. He was dealt a bad hand without Isak. Wilson was rusty, having not obviously played for very much for over the last year. There are reasons why Newcastle were at a disadvantage yesterday, and against Liverpool, that's the last thing you need, especially at Anfield with their record. I think Newcastle were poor. I think this is another example of why Anfield has never been a good place for Newcastle to be. I think Bruno wasn't great yesterday, but there seems to be a real reactive approach from some fans on social media. I know it's social media. I know the whole thing of it's like an echo chamber, but it wasn't a good performance from Bruno, but lots of people saying that, he isn't good enough. I've seen that generally. Somebody replied to me on Twitter saying that his mentality and his quality is not good enough to help Newcastle win trophies. When with him in the team, Newcastle have been closer to winning a trophy. They're in another final, and they've been to one already. than they ever have been in my lifetime. He is a huge reason for that. He's been the heartbeat of this team. We can't take him for granted, even though he was poor yesterday. And I think Newcastle should be in a position to attack the Brighton game on Sunday, the West Ham game next week, but obviously the cup final is what everyone's starting to think of. Everyone is starting to think in terms of the cup final. Will players be fit? Will Isak be back? And I'm saying that it isn't a serious injury. I think the cup final is the reason why he didn't play in this game. So I would imagine that Newcastle would be a very, very different outfit at Wembley, but there are a lot of things to learn as well. They've got to be intense, they've got to be at it, and Eddie Howe has to get his tactics right because Liverpool will expose it. They didn't have to be very good yesterday. Their goals were very much simple, very easy goals to concede. Nick Pope got a lot of criticism for not diving down to collect Szoboszlai's goal. It's a little bit harsh considering it went through both Tonali and Burns' legs and it caught him off guard a little bit. I know there's a little bit of a narrative developing about Nick Pope and his positioning over the last couple of games and whether he should be in for Dubravka. Personally, I think it is the right choice, even though he looks a little bit, he needs to get his confidence and his sharpness back a little bit as well. But I think it's harsh to judge him on that goal. Let me know what you think in the comments, but I think it's harsh to judge him on that goal because it went very quickly through two players' legs and caught him a little bit off guard. So another poor game for Newcastle at Anfield, but it all isn't lost. I think Newcastle can bounce back from this, they can learn some lessons, and they'll be a lot stronger at Wembley, and that is ultimately the most important thing. Thanks so much for joining me on this video. Like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you next time on Thursday to look ahead to the Brighton game next weekend. Cheers.